to order at 7:03 p.m. Emily, will you please call roll?
Sure. Commissioner Shannon Gibb Randall? Here. Great. Commissioner Skinner?
Here.
Councilmember Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Graham?
Here.
Commissioner Morocco? Councilmember Frenzel?
Here.
Commissioner Mursky?
Here.
Commissioner Rigo? Commissioner Slavic? Commissioner Appel?
Here.
Apple? Appel?
You know.
Whatever, okay. Commissioner Needham?
Here.
Commissioner Hutton?
Appreciate your
And Commissioner Hanna?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, you have in front of you a draft of tonight's agenda. Are there any additions or corrections? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Oh, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Agenda is approved. You also have in front of you draft minutes for the meeting, the April 27th Environmental Commission meeting. Are there any corrections or questions about the meeting minutes? Is there a motion to approve the April minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Minutes are approved. Would anyone here this evening like to offer public comment?
Sorry, would it be possible for you to speak a little bit more into the microphone?
Yes.
Just-
Sorry.
I feel like just a little hard to hear.
No, that's okay.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Can you hear better, Anna, if she speaks into the microphone?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Moving on to unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business before the commission? New business. We do have two new commissioners. I only see one of them here tonight. So Shannon, would you like to just introduce yourself briefly and give your background?
Yeah. My name is Shannon Gibb Randall. I'm the liaison from the Planning Commission. So I've been on the Planning Commission for about a year and a half, 2 years. So I'm that official liaison. So that will be the pathway to be able to kind of get information back and forth between those two entities. I'm a landscape architect in town. I went to the School of Natural Resources here. I've been practicing for about the past 19 years. Have a small company in town. And we did the site design for City Hall that we're sitting at right now. So where every drop of water that falls here, infiltration to the ground, we do a lot of work with innovative stormwater management. So I'd say that's a big focus of our firm. So happy to be here.
Welcome. We're glad to have you. All right. Moving on, we received a memo from the city administrator earlier today that gives us an update on some of the things that have been happening regarding solid waste and the MRF. These updates will be occurring monthly moving forward. So would you like to give us an update, Howard?
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to take a couple minutes of your time tonight. Earlier today, I did send out a memo to provide an update on matters pertaining to both solid waste and recycling. These are items that have been of interest to the Commission for a while as we work our way through really a period of transition. Many of our solid waste-related contracts are at a point where they're being resolicited. Some have some very good news. Some are still a mystery as to the financial impact. I'm going to touch on these things lightly and not read the memo, but certainly respond to any questions that you may have to the best of my ability. First thing is the solid waste fund. And generally the solid waste fund is balanced and it's solvent. When you read what staff provided, there is a concern this year that in the upcoming fiscal year, the fund will get hit with a $5.2 million transfer out to satisfy its outstanding OPEB or other post-employment benefit requirements. It's part of the changes in government accounting standards that have occurred over the last several years to make sure that pension plans, benefit plans are able to fully fund their outstanding obligations. So it's an unfortunate time for it to hit all at once, but the good news is what's related in the next paragraph as we talk about recent procurement. We had anticipated our cost for our solid waste contract to go up by about a third as we procured a new agreement. We had a very good agreement with Waste Management, and we thought that the market would drive it up. You can imagine our surprise when, in fact, we had a third decrease in the cost, which, for a variety of reasons, is very good news, but it will help us with the solid waste fund balance, and we won't be looking at a large increase in the cost of non-recyclable waste disposal. Another contract that is for council will be on its agenda on its June 5th meeting, which is the interim recycling agreement. That will be the same type of proposal we made to council in April when we had brought two contracts back. One was with Recycle Ann Arbor, one was with Waste Management. The reason for doing that is, as we're all aware, the discussion about social benefit, environmental benefit really speaks towards value and not just cost. So the question was, through negotiations, could we get to the point where the value of the contract would favor shipping our materials in an unbundled state and taking advantage of other actions that would reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. So through some rather intense and time-consuming discussions and negotiations, we're going to bring back that contract to council at its June 5th meeting. The good news is those costs are closer, so the value becomes more of a germane discussion. At its root, that is a policy decision for council to consider. You know, as the city administrator, my responsibility is to make sure that we get value for every dollar that's spent, and the discussion of environmental value is something that is a matter of policy for council to discuss and decide upon. So I think what we've done is presented options that give them the choice as to which direction they want to go in, and that'll be on their agenda at their next meeting. It has to be passed at the next meeting because the current contract expires on June 30th. So we kind of run out the clock a little bit. Some other things that are coming up is there's a contract for student move-in and move-out services that is up for bid, and then the compost center operations contract will expire in January. So as you know, we've committed to you contracts of a significant nature we will bring back and discuss with the Environmental Commission before bringing those to council. The next paragraph in the memo deals with plans, and I'll go through those very quickly. Using the feedback that the commission has provided, the city's organics management plan has been finalized, and the document is posted on the city's website. The county has released its draft solid waste management plan amendment for public review and comment, and city staff is working with the county on that as well. The county does strongly encourage comments during the review period, as this is the only opportunity to integrate feedback from the public, municipalities, and other interested parties. We are working with the county as well on a waste diversion site feasibility study to identify potential approaches and locations for increased drop-off and recycling opportunities throughout the county. The city is working with the county staff to schedule a presentation on that matter for the Environmental Commission. This summer, we are going to seek an RFP, we're going to put out an RFP seeking consulting services for the development of a solid waste plan update as well. The benefit of proceeding with this right now is that there are so many things going on. We can get a more comprehensive look at the market and the industry through the lens of today's conditions. Again, those will be things that we will bring back for discussion to the commission. One of the things that we are looking at with the county is a more regional approach to our solid waste and recycling operations. We are very fortunate to have a location that we can use that is appropriately sited and zoned, and with the potential to have to not just replace the equipment in the MRF, but perhaps expand the building. It's a good time to see if there is a better approach that is economical and achieves our community values. And I know there's been a lot of concern over how long that may take. Our commitment is to get through that as quickly as possible. For a variety of reasons, we needed to wait until council acts on the interim contract before we can go down that path. Then, finally, Chicago Bridge and Iron, whose contract is reaching its capacity, is performing an examination to see what the payback period would be for us to get the MRF up and running again. If we're going to proceed at looking at a regional approach, that too is going to take some time to get it put in place. So the question is, how long of an operational period do we have to have for the MRF to justify the investment in upgrading the equipment? And as I've said on the other items, we'll certainly have that discussion before the Environmental Commission as well. So that's an update on solid waste. I also, as part of getting ready for the budget, sent a separate memo to the Environmental Commission on the sustainability actions that are going on. While we can do more and that we can be more visible in what we do to exercise a leadership position regionally and in the state, there are very many good things that we are still doing and are looking at launching in the coming year. So I wanted to provide that as a way for us to actually feel a little bit better about where we are and those values that we hold and how we're taking action on them, because I think some of the other items have been a little bit clouded with the discussion of recycling and solid waste. So I appreciate any feedback on that memo as well. And with that, certainly would like to engage in any questions that you have.
So why is changing the staging for materials going out to the landfill so much less expensive than doing it through the recycle facility? How is that so time-saving and so much easier?
Talking about solid waste? The solid waste contract actually has operation of the transfer station. In the past, it was under the recycling contract. But I really think the reason we got a better price is there's a new player in the market, and they are sometimes more aggressive in their pricing. So I think that's probably the real reason.
Very good.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for the updates. This is much appreciated, first of all. The solid waste plan update, the city solid waste plan update, what would the rough timeline be for that actually happening? If we go out for an RFP on it this summer, when would the update start and end, would you guess?
I can tell you that if we go out for the RFP this summer, we'll start sometime this fall. I can't give you a completion date. And part of that is you have to scope it, we have to negotiate the agreement, and then we want to make sure that we provide the time for robust public input and discussion. So I'm not going, until we have the RFP written, I can't really tell you what the performance period is.
I have a question. So you mentioned in the memo that, that the solid waste fund is projected to go below the minimum threshold for its balance by the end of 2018. So what exactly will happen? How will operations continue if there's not enough money in the fund?
The reason the fund won't become insolvent and run out of money, we have a financial policy that requires 25% of the operating funds to be in there. So we'll dip below that based upon the cost right now of the recycling contract. I don't think we fully analyzed the impact of the lower contract for solid waste yet, so I think that'll offset some of the concern that will go below the minimum balance. If we do, it'll take council approval for us to dip below the balance, and then as we look towards 2019, we'd look at ways to restore back to the 25% operating cost fund balance.
I don't know much about the enterprise fund and other options out there, but do you know if there has been any discussion on other funding mechanisms for our solid waste in the city?
I don't think there's been anything formal. Part of our the decision to look at a regional approach and maybe an outsourced approach is a way to keep it as operating as an enterprise where it covers its own costs. So at some point, if we go down that path, the rates will be set to provide, to cover the cost plus whatever profit the vendor would require. The advantage to doing it on a regional basis is you have a, bigger throughput and you have the advantage of volume. I don't-
But could we still get that volume while keeping the MRF city-owned and just accepting material from other communities nearby?
We could. I think, I know the county doesn't have any desire to own the MRF. They do have a desire to participate in a regional approach. So it may be that the operation of the MRF does stay as a city facility, contractor operated. It could be that it doesn't as well, but I think we need to go down that path and look at it.
Forgive me for delving into the weeds on OPEB. Knowing that we took the OPEB hit in other city funds in previous fiscal years, I know I'd asked you this question before, and I don't remember the answer, so that's probably my fault. Is there any reason that we have to take it all in this coming fiscal year in the solid waste fund, or is there a way to spread that out?
The answer is, I don't know, and I'm looking at it.
Great.
All the other funds, all the other enterprise funds are making the adjustment. This past year, the water and wastewater funds took their lumps, so to speak. But I do agree with you that we need to see if there's a way, from an accounting standpoint, we can do it and not put the city at any risk of having an ongoing concern in an audit.
So, thanks.
I'm the representative here from the Parks Advisory Commission. So I have the privilege of seeing how two different commissions operate. With Parks, there's a lot of go-between between the commissioners and staff. They seem to use us as an opportunity to be able to make sure that the needs of the community are being met. And there's, also we are responsible for sending resolutions before City Council in terms of spending. My question is there a way that you can see from the administration standpoint of being able to make this relationship between the commission and the staff more productive in a way that's going to, reach our city goals and, ideally make your life easier as well. So I just wonder if you could give some thoughts of that from your career experience.
Well, absolutely, and I think history over the last half year or so is that we are doing that more. We are engaging with the Transportation Commission on those matters. Externally, we're working with the school district and their traffic safety committee more to get input. And the back and forth we had on the recycling contract, I think, is indicative of wanting to engage with the commission more on these matters. I look forward in dealing with the Energy Commission more too on matters that deal with our climate action plan and approach to reducing carbon emissions. So I think staff, and certainly I respect the expertise that the commission brings to the table and want to take advantage of that and leverage it. And it's a particularly good time to do that as we're looking at the plans that we want to review and set ourselves up for what the future is going to look like in all these different areas. So I would agree the Parks Commission is Parks Advisory Commission is a good model to follow, and we'll try and do that.
I guess my follow-up to that would be, will there be opportunity for the commission to be able to work with staff prior to the release of the RFP for the solid waste plan? In my time here, I've seen a number of RFPs that went out that maybe didn't necessarily quite get what we were hoping for as a commission.
So the example I'll give you is working with the Human Rights Commission on the RFP for the independent review of the police department's community engagement practices. And we met with members of the commission and members of the community who aren't commissioners to draft the RFP, and they actually did participate in the selection as voting members of of that selection committee as well. So there is a model in place to do that, and it's a whole lot easier to get buy-in earlier in the process than try and convince you that under the cover of darkness, we did the right thing.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just have one
Yeah, go
more question. On the topic of staff, do you have an update on the staff person that was in last year's budget that still hasn't been hired?
What I can tell you is Mr. Yupi and I talked about it, and they went out and recruited and were not able to find a person who met the desires in terms of capability, experience that we were looking for. That came up about the time we were discussing whether to go out on a regional approach. So, and I've spoken to Councilmember Smith about this, is I think what we're going to do is use that opportunity to bring someone in from the outside on a contract basis for a short term to help us get a path forward in terms of looking at what we want to do with the MRF. And then once we get that settled, we'll go look to hire. I think it'd be difficult for us to hire in an environment of uncertainty. And also, I think we probably have to reassess what the position is worth from a salary standpoint.
Do you think that will be a decision that is made in the short term?
I think, well, it depends on how we define short term. I think it'll be within the next budget year, because it's not good to have a position hanging out there open for a variety of reasons. But I think there are some individuals who are available to help us who are essentially independent consultants who we can take advantage of their expertise. And then once we get ourselves with the commission's participation in a position where we know what we want to pursue, then I think we can go out and look to hire on a better basis.
Yeah, I know that staff has so much on their plates, and there's a lot going on right now, and there has been for a long time. So I hope that they can have some help soon in order to start thinking about moving forward.
So Mr. Yupi is in the process of hiring his deputy chief of staff position. That'll help a large amount in terms of handling the administrative burden that exists. There are some other things that are working their way through the pipeline right now too that'll be settled. So I think it's probably a little bit of an unusual period in the volume of big things that are there. But I appreciate your support in getting the person hired because they do need the extra hands.
John, sorry.
I have a couple of comments and questions. I'd first of all like to start by also echoing previous comments, thanking you for the update. Thank you for being here. Also, Mr. Huppy was here at our last meeting, I think it was, and the fact that you're engaging with us directly is really appreciated very much. A couple of questions. One, an obstacle I understood with RAA was the request for $1 million bond. Is that still the case, and has that been resolved?
My understanding is they've satisfied the request for a performance bond that we had asked for.
Good, good. Another question going back to our last meeting, Mr. Huppy showed us a trend chart for the waste fund balance development over the years, and it really drops off, or at that time it dropped off a cliff. And part of that was due to the OPEB accounting, which I think we all understand and makes sense. But obviously there were a lot of reasons driving that. From what your report and your verbal comments are tonight, it sounds like the situation's a lot better. But I'm wondering if it would be helpful for us, for council, and frankly also for the administration to update that, where based on the latest information, we see what that development looks like, maybe with some comments that describe what happened when and some scenarios, because it really, there weren't a lot of comments in the meeting, but there were a lot of discussions afterwards, because I think everybody was sort of taken aback that the fund went from like $15 million plus down to minus over a couple of years. And so I think it's really important from a transparency perspective to understand what that fund is looking like, especially now with some of the latest developments.
We can do that. As Commissioner Skinner said, we'll be appearing here more frequently, and I think giving you an update on the status of the fund is one of the things that is a reasonable request to get on a monthly or quarterly basis.
Okay, great. And just lastly, I'd like to echo the comments about an opportunity to look at the RFP. With the MRF, we know, for example, when the MRF RFP went out, costs were only 10% of the weighting, and in the end, obviously, we're weighted a lot higher than that. Another comment about, Chair Skinner's comments about resources, I think, you know, the burn rate potentially on the balance is so fast that any additional resources, to me, make sense, so that we accelerate whatever we need to do to get away from a burn rate to where we're building the fund back up again. So I support everybody else's comments. That's all.
You know, we're fortunate to be, as a city government and a city administrator, I'm fortunate to be in a environment where there's a lot of talented residents and citizens who want to contribute and assist in making the city government as good as it possibly can be. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes it, you know, you get 10 Ann Arborites and 20 opinions in a room. But in the end, it helps. And the experience that I had with the, again, with the Human Rights Commission on the police review was reinforcing of the idea it makes sense to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. All right. Moving on, we have two resolutions to consider this evening, and the first concerns the formation of a zero waste subcommittee. This is a group that will meet for about the next year, that will basically discuss how strategies that the commission could potentially introduce that would help the city reduce its impact and reduce its waste, and other ways that the community can get involved. So you all should have a copy of the resolution in front of you. Well, you can find the resolution on Legistar. Do we have to have it in front of us?
I don't, I'll go make copies.
Well, let's assume we don't. So it is available on Legistar. I am just going to read the first resolved clause. You can find the names of the individuals that are appointed to the subcommittee in the resolution, which is on Legistar. So therefore be it resolved, the Environmental Commission hereby creates a zero waste subcommittee to meet for no longer than a calendar year. So now that you have heard that resolution, is there a motion to consider the question of adopting the resolution?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second? Commissioner Frenzel. I'm supposed to say the name, I just realized. Commissioner Mursky and Commissioner Frenzel, Councilperson Frenzel. All in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries. The second resolution before you tonight concerns updating and reviving the City of Ann Arbor's Green Fleets Resolution. Commissioner Mursky, can you please introduce the resolution? And you do have that in front of you?
I
or
have a
no?
copy of it with me.
Okay.
So, should I read it, or should I just summarize it?
You can summarize, and then if you wouldn't mind reading just
The
the
resolved.
resolved clauses.
Okay, so, the background of the resolution is that the city has a policy for so-called green fleets, in other words, the vehicle fleet of the city, so that that fleet is operated in a manner that reduces emission as well as also reduces operational costs. That policy was dated in 2004. The policy was in place and acted upon through 2012, when the goal of reducing the average fleet mileage was achieved. But since then, it's been basically dormant. And given that we have a climate action plan that that has basically committed the city to making greenhouse gas reductions, given also the fact that the city is facing a gap between revenues and expenses, it makes sense that the city take a look at its vehicle fleet and operates it in an as efficient manner as possible. And so the recommendation is that the green seats policy is revived. The resolved clauses read as follows. Resolved that City Council direct the city administrator to update and revive the city green fleets policy, incorporating all of the major elements of the original policy, and then in parentheses, goals, objectives, measures of success and targets, team approach, etc., accounting for changes in departmental units and organizational structure that have changed since the original adoption of the policy, and resolved the updated policy promote the purchase of PEVs or plug-in electric vehicles and their charging by city-owned photovoltaics to be installed according to the above referenced, and that's in a whereas statement, resolution to adopt city policy on solar power generation and energy efficiency in city-owned facilities, and resolved the updated policy incorporate best practices and lessons learned from peer municipality policies, for example, alternatives to travel, e.g. virtual meetings, and the use of alternative modes of transportation, signage proclaiming city-owned vehicle or proclaiming city-owned zero-emission vehicles, and aggressive, regular, updated targets. And then two other short clauses resolved the updated policy be open-ended and not be suspended or materially revised without first conferring with the Energy and Environmental Commissions, and resolve the updated policy be put into effect no later than December 31st, 2017. I'd also like to change or make one addition. I did some reading this afternoon about these types of policies, and a lot of cities are using telematics. And what that is basically a device that you plug into your car. Insurance companies use them now, and depending on driving habits and things like that, it gives feedback that can be analyzed. And with that, the efficiency and the way that vehicles are used can be monitored. It can be done in a way that is not privacy invasive. And I would recommend, or I ask that it be put in the resolved clause that where we're urging that in the revision of the policy, telematics simply be looked at. So it would read, after the use of alternative modes of transportation, comma, use of telematics, comma, signage proclaiming city-owned zero-emission vehicles, etc. So it would be a recommendation that they looked at best practices like that. Questions, comments? You have it now in front of you. Yes.
Would this include idling?
The city already has a policy on idling, correct?
Is
So,
it enforced?
yes, it's just took effect.
brand
or will
new.
take effect
Takes effect the 1st of July.
1st of July.
I'm sorry, it's going to take effect the 1st of July? Okay,
So that's already covered.
right. And is there a plan for enforcement,
Of
the anti-idling?
the idling, the
Yes.
anti-idling.
This was passed a few, last year?
We passed it last autumn, it passed council pretty quickly thereafter. My presumption is that it was going to be a complaint-driven enforcement also.
And I think we brought it up briefly at the last meeting, because I think, well, my experience is that buses, especially school buses, are idling all the time. But I don't know if there is, were we approaching Ann Arbor Public Schools to, or other entities that tend to have a lot of idling vehicles to comply?
My recollection is that staff worked directly with staff on that.
Okay.
And if I could comment from personal experience, having the policy is an excellent opportunity for conversation starting when you see this behavior. And it's a great way to encourage people, to educate people about the amount of greenhouse gases that are generated by leaving the car running while you are looking at your phone. And encourage them to change their behavior in a friendly sort of way.
And taking the subject back to the green fees policy, by the way, one of the advantage of new vehicles is they have idling devices where when a car comes to a stop, then the car shuts down, and then as soon as the accelerator is pressed again, then the car engine jumps back in. So by having a green seats policy, our own city vehicles, as we replace them in a way that makes sense, would incorporate that feature. By the way, one other comment. We considered this in the last Energy Commission meeting, and there was some comments about making the resolution less prescriptive, which I did. And because the purchasing of vehicles is pretty complex because there's a lot of different things to take into consideration. What's the application? What's the total cost of ownership? How important is emissions reduction? Those kinds of things should be reviewed between now and the end of the year as the policy is drafted. So there's lots of those details that I think we shouldn't debate here, and frankly, we should allow, as was pointed out earlier, in cooperation between commissioners and other experts and staff that would be working on the update of the policy to reflect that in the updated policy, as opposed to, say, resolved 50 times all the little details that we think should be in this policy.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Apple?
Yeah, is your staff on board with this policy? And in my short term here, I have discovered that staff is sometimes the key missing link to be able to get these good ideas to move forward. So that's my question to you: is do we have somebody here that is willing to do the legwork and has the time to be able to do the legwork to be able to make this a reality?
So I don't know if staff is behind it. I sent a copy of the resolution to Administrator Lazarus about 4 or 5 days ago and didn't hear any feedback. I didn't specifically ask for feedback. The old policy is formulated such that a number of representatives from different city units are to be represented on a team that administers the policy. I would assume that similar units or the same ones, if they still exist in that form today, would be a part of the reformulation and reviving of the policy. But I didn't talk to anyone specifically on staff as to whether they supported it or not. I know it was in effect from 2004 through 2012, so at least to some degree, and the goal was achieved, so at least to some degree, staff obviously must have supported it at that time. But obviously, those were different times. Staff was much larger, at least for the initial part of that time. So I don't know for sure. I would be willing to work to some degree on that, and hopefully we can get other people, either on Energy Commission or Transportation or others in the community who are experts at the university to help with the policy. And as I mentioned, there are policies like this. I looked online, Seattle has one, Toronto has one, the state of Illinois, the state of Ohio. So hopefully we can copy and paste a lot. And hopefully there's not a whole lot of time.
I believe we also have a new commissioner who has a high level of expertise in the subject.
We do. We have the former Ann Arbor Clean Cities Coordinator here at our fingertips.
It's true.
I'm
You're
not
drafted.
sure. I don't know if I'm allowed to jump around in the agenda to
Yeah.
introduce you.
You are.
Okay.
You can do whatever you
All right,
want.
you can introduce yourself.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Josh Rigo. I live on the west side of town. Moved here about 5.5 years ago with my then girlfriend, now wife, and with a 2-year plan to move back to California, and just can't leave. Like it here too much. So yeah,
What
really.
do you do?
What do I do? Oh, yeah, I work for an organization called Navigant. We evaluate DTE's energy efficiency programs. So, yeah, happy to be here. It's an honor.
Thank you. Welcome. All right.
Allison?
Back to the resolution. Is
Allison?
there, oh, sorry, Commissioner Graham?
John German, when he was on the commission, did much work on ethanol. And I trust part of the development of these policies will follow on all of the stuff that he brought forward on, then, I guess the bottom line was nonsense of using ethanol in fuels.
So there's a statement in the whereas. Whereas vehicles running on current biodiesel and ethanol fuels do not significantly reduce total net greenhouse gases. So that's pointed out. Just as an editorial comment, I just listened to a podcast the other day, and apparently, because they're able to use a lot more cellulose materials and things like that, the efficiency in producing biofuels has improved. To what degree and to what degree that changes the overall balance, I don't know. But that, again, is a reason why I didn't say no or only or this or that type of vehicle, for precisely those reasons. And yes, my understanding is similar to yours, but apparently there's maybe some change.
Thank you.
Any more discussion?
Given the openness of the resolved, I think this is an easy move forward for us, at least from my perspective. Mr. Mirsky, I missed the last Energy Commission meeting, and my apologies. Will this be going back to them also?
Yeah, we thought we would do that, but we wanted to go ahead and get the ball moving. I had communicated with Commissioner Appleyard, Chairman Appleyard, and with Chairman Hutton, and Chairman Appleyard recommended that we go ahead and take action here because it came first, and then bring it back to the Energy Commission. Energy Commission has seen, or I should say, at least Commissioner Appleyard and Commissioner Cleavey, Chair and Vice Chair, have both seen this draft, other than the verbal change that I recommended this evening.
Great. And then I'm not sure if it's well under their purview, but at least informally bringing it to the Transportation Commission seems wise also. And
That was a
then,
question that I had too. That was, Councilperson, it's not really directly in your area of expertise, right, or focus?
just don't want to make another misstep and
Yeah,
not inform people.
I think that is a little bit outside the purview of what we do at transportation, which is much more focused on the network.
Yep. And then just a point of order, Madam Chair, Chair for a moment. We have an amendment to the resolution on the table, so we need to approve that amendment before we approve the.
Oh, okay.
motion. So just
Well, is there a motion to approve the amendment of the resolution?
I will second the amendment, so you have a second and then discussion. We've discussed.
Okay. Do I need someone
Call the question.
first
Call the question.
all in favor?
for the amendment?
Yes, and then we go on to the larger.
Is there a motion to consider the amendment of the resolution?
Just go to a vote.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Messed that one up. I'm confused.
Great, good job.
All right, the motion carries.
And now for the whole thing.
Yeah.
Oh, still have to do the whole thing?
Resolution.
Oh, okay.
So we just
I thought we
voted
already
to
did
change,
that.
Just,
change the resolution, adding in the late term amendment,
and now we have to do the whole
and
resolution.
now we do the resolution.
Okay, is there a motion to consider the
Already on the
question?
table.
Already, yep.
Oh.
So we can take a vote now, right?
Yep.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries.
Very good.
You're not the first person to be frustrated with Robert.
Okay, moving on to reports from committees and chairs. We have a metrics committee that has not met yet, so there will likely be an update at our next meeting. We have a new subcommittee on pollinators that is being chaired by Commissioner Slavic, although she couldn't be here tonight to give an update on that, so we will have a resolution for the formation of that subcommittee at our next meeting. Can we get updates from other commissions?
From Energy, be happy to give an update. So a couple of points that I think will be of general interest. First of all, I think most people on the Environmental Commission are aware that we kicked off the so-called Ann Arbor Solar Club. The second Solar Power Hour was held today. We had one about 3 weeks ago, and the third and the fourth, I think, are also scheduled and planned. So far, we have 18 solar projects in active fulfillment. And just as a point of comparison, the last 3 years, we averaged about 25 a year. So we're doing a little bit better, even in spite of the concerns that we've had with taxes on solar installations being potentially a disincentive for installing them. So we're at least making some progress, swimming a little bit upstream. At the last meeting, there's presentations that we had from DTE, and there's also a new development from DTE that I'll mention. First of all, DTE presented its energy efficiency programs, they presented primarily the residential programs. They have other programs for multi-tenant buildings and for commercial buildings, but we focused on the residential programs. The intent was to see whether or not we could leverage those programs more than what we do already in Ann Arbor. The programs seem excellent. I personally had a home energy consultation, which was very good. I informed other commissioners and recommended that you sign up for one if you haven't. I'll comment first on that and then comment about two other ones. With the home energy consultation, the problem with trying to leverage that is that there's in effect no benefit in leveraging that for Ann Arbor because there's a certain amount of funding that DTE gets through the monthly assessment on everyone's bill. And when that amount is used up, and it is used up every year, they don't do any more consultations. And with the consultations, they also give out free devices and things like that, like bulbs and thermostats. And so there's only a certain amount of those that can be done. And when that funding runs out, and it's run out every year so far, trying to get more done in Ann Arbor really doesn't do anything for the climate because all we do is we get more done in Ann Arbor, but they don't do them somewhere else in their territory. So it really isn't something that we can leverage. What we can leverage are two other programs. They have an online survey, which then provides feedback to residents on things that they can do to improve their efficiency. And DTE also has an Insight app that you can download that gives you feedback on your energy usage, including an additional feature where you can get instantaneous values on your usage. So if you put lights on and then turn them off, you can actually see how much difference that makes in your energy usage. Those are unlimited. So I would encourage people and the general public to use those. The other program that DTE presented was a new renewable energy program called My Green Energy, where My is MI, standing for Michigan. It's available for subscription to residential and commercial customers, where customers can decide to get anywhere from 5 to 100% of their energy usage from DTE solar and wind farms that they've put in specifically for this program. And if this program is fully subscribed, then they would look at installing new renewable energy. So this is something that drives actually the installation of new renewable energy, which is a little bit different than their Green Currents did in the past. You pay a little bit higher upfront, but the relative cost um, compared to the normal rate is decreases over time so that it's actually more favorable. It's something that the Energy Commission will be looking at as an alternative or an option to recommend to residents compared to other community solar type of projects that we're going to be evaluating in the next couple of months. The other thing relative to DTE is that on Tuesday, the 16th of May, it announced that it's going to reduce its current greenhouse gas emissions 80% by 2050. So really good news from DTE. It's going to do most of that by retiring a lot of coal plants and converting those to natural gas. At the end, they're forecasting they will have 40% generated by natural gas, 40% by renewable energy, and 20% by nuclear. They've set a couple of midterm targets, a 30% reduction by, they didn't define exactly, but by the early 2020s, and a 45% reduction by 2030, which is a higher reduction than that was even in the Obama administration's Clean Power Plan that has since been canceled by the Trump administration. So that's definitely good news from DTE, and it's something that the Energy Commission is going to be looking at in terms of what impact that has on our climate action plan targets and how we achieve those targets. The last thing from the Energy Commission, sorry it's so detailed, but hopefully it's been interesting. We have a working session on the 13th of June. It's open to the public. It won't be televised. There won't be resolutions and things like that. And one of the things that we're going to be working on in that meeting is, as I mentioned before, community solar and what kind of options there are. We're going to try to form a subcommittee focusing on that, and we hope to engage volunteers from the community as well as several commissioners to work on that so that we can have in the end truly a solar for all option for all residents of Ann Arbor, either through the solar club where you buy it and put it on your own residence and or your own commercial establishment, or you subscribe to a program like DTE's or one of ours, and that would even potentially, and we hope there's one program at least that would even apply to renters. So that would be a nice thing on top of what DTE is doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Apple?
Canoe liveries and pools are open this weekend, starting full-time, which is very exciting. There was a recent pickleball courts are going in. So pickleball is a tennis-like sport that is the fastest growing sport. Leslie Park. So this is the part of Leslie Park that you get to off of Duvarn. You can't see it from the golf course. I embarrassed myself by asking where in relation to the golf course this was at a meeting. And let's see, there were also new parking lot for Argo canoe livery that incorporated a lot of citizen concerns in the design and ended up being quite successful and much better as a result of that public participation process. It was also completely done in-house with funds available by city staff. So interesting things from parks. Get out there and enjoy them.
Thank you. And Commissioner Gibb Randall, do you have an update from Planning Commission?
I would just say that we are in the process of setting our agenda for what we're going to be working on outside of, projects coming in and approving them. And so things are a little nebulous right now, but those are getting more firmed up. And I would say one of the items that could be on the list this year is thinking a little bit more about our landmark tree ordinance. And perhaps becoming a little bit more fine-grained about species, things like that right now. And basically a big invasive tree kind of equals a big oak tree. And so we've had some issues with that in terms of projects coming in, and so that's one thing that kind of relates a little bit to some of the work that's done here. I'm not sure that that's going to float to the top of the list for this year or not, but that was one of the things that was discussed.
Thank you. Report from council? Councilperson Frenzel or Smith?
Apparently Councilmember Smith is tired today. I think as you all received, at least from me, and many of us have had discussions, and a couple of us have had offline meetings, Councilmember Smith and I greatly appreciate all of your work, advocacy, education as we went into the budget season. We, I think, are all deeply disappointed in the results there. The compromises made within the system are real and are challenging, and so advocating on behalf of one set of priorities within the system doesn't always get what we would most want. And so, yes, again, thank you all very much for your time and efforts, and aside from this table, your advocacy on behalf of especially climate change. That's the big one that I have today.
I have a question, I guess, to everyone on the commission. In our last meeting, we considered a memo that was drafted by Chairperson Hutton, and also I think there was a resolution that we passed. What is the status of that? And in particular, there was a request in the memo asking that city staff support the Environmental Commission, and I know the Energy Commission has obviously the same interest, to look at what alternative funding might be so that climate action would be supported on an ongoing basis at a level that is above the current funding in the fiscal 18 budget. Does anybody know where that stands?
Regarding sustainable funding sources, I put that question on to the administrator as well as legal staff, because
Good.
I had heard that it had gone in both those directions. I was not a part of either of those conversations, and I have yet to hear back.
Okay.
But I will certainly, that was
If
just a
you
couple
would-
days ago, so yeah, certainly.
Yep, that would be great. And we also, I think in the resolution, moved up the date to August with the idea that if something were to come out that could be acted on in terms of a millage, that at least that would be possible, feasibly possible, whether that would be realistic or not in terms of passage and marketing and getting support for that, that's another matter. But it seems to me that we did set a date of sometime in March to try to get some level of feedback, what options there might be. My guess is that we'll probably pursue other options, at least in the near term, but if we could at least have some sense of what those options might be, that would be great, whether they're fees or other taxes or millages or whatever the realm of options are, that would be great.
All right, report from, oh, sorry, I didn't see.
You would
it.
like a Natural Features Committee report?
Oh, I'm sorry, you weren't on my list. Please, give us
yes,
an update.
It's a problem that natural features are not on your list, actually. In fact,
It's my fault.
not yours. I'd like to encourage commissioners to be more aware of the degree to which our natural features, not just ours, but the planet's, are an issue and a central element of climate action. If you look at the history of the Earth, our gas reserves, our oil reserves, our peat reserves, our limestone and dolomite reserves came from plants. If we upset the apple cart on this planet, in 100 million years or so, it will be plants that turn it right side up again. Among the plants that are most valuable about sinking carbon are large and old trees in large and old ecosystems that are in good balance. The whole point of our natural features program in Ann Arbor is to protect the best of our natural features, most particularly the best of our native forest fragments. Those native forest fragments are under threat, first of all, not just from a warming climate, but from a climate that has the Columbian disposition throughout the planet of species into places they don't belong, from places where they once did, and they upset the ecosystem. In our case, it was buckthorn from the Caucasus Mountains and honeysuckles from China that became a shrub layer in our forests and shaded out most of the understory and herbaceous species, and certainly shaded out the ability for our native forest trees to reproduce. Then our ecosystem, handed to us by perhaps 100,000 years of Indians living here, was a fire-managed landscape, and we have tried to restore fire once we've cleared the invasive species and shrubs out to help restore the herbaceous understory, the herbaceous flora. When Indians handed over our location to us, Europeans, in 1824 in Ann Arbor, there were some 400 species of flowering plants here. I would challenge any of you to find that many in a whole city block, anywhere. The Indians gave us a very well-balanced habitat, and they had deer to deal with. They kept deer in very careful balance. They used them for clothing and tools and very great meat and food. How do I put this? We really need to pay attention to our ecosystems here and everywhere, because if we are going to adapt our habitat in the face of climate change, in the face of warming temperatures, we're going to need to know how to move some species. We're going to need to know how and when things are happening to decrease the diversity of species overall on the planet. If we don't maintain the diversity of species, we will not maintain the ability to support us on this planet. Last of all, I just encourage, I worked outdoors in the summer of 1988. It did not rain from Easter Sunday until July 17th, not a drop. There were days in 104 degrees in Ann Arbor and the wind was blowing 45 miles an hour. It was terrible. That was the year Hansen, the NOAA scientist, came before the Congress and said, we have a climate problem. I'm right with all of you guys about it, but it's not just energy policy. It's a policy about how we care for the green things on our planet. The magic of chlorophyll is astonishing. It is that thing, that cell, that takes carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and puts it into energy and sugar and plant growth. We are so lucky to have it, and it's green plants that have it in the ocean and on the land. Thank you. Speech ended.
Amen.
Thank you. Report from staff. Emily, would you like to give us an update?
Sure. Commissioner Graham, I apologize for leaving off natural features. I will take responsibility for that.
It's all right, we're quiet.
So I have two updates from staff. One is a project that I've been working on that I'm really excited about. It's called Solar Faithful. It's a pilot project that the city is doing in cooperation with Michigan Interfaith Power and Light. And we are looking to put solar on up to 3 congregations, houses of worship here in Ann Arbor. And it's through the Sunshot program, through the DOE. We actually received $10,000 in technical assistance money. We have a coach in Detroit. Things are looking very great. And I wanted to play a video for you, but it wouldn't load on there, so I will send it all to you by email. And then the second.
Before you go on to the second.
Yeah.
The 3 is just an initial target.
It
And
is.
hopefully, if we're successful, we can propagate this and have it on houses of worship all over, not only Ann Arbor and Washtenaw County, but the state of Michigan, correct?
That is correct. And we're looking at putting together a few different funding sources so that the congregations who don't have a lot of income can get solar on their roof regardless.
And you're looking at one of the stars of the video.
Yeah. I don't know if that means you want to go watch it or not.
Yes, definitely do.
And then the second update is something that I just ran across. It's called Patronicity. Michigan Economic Development Corporation is been working with them, and it's a crowdfunding platform. They offer up to a $50,000 match for cities that can raise that much money for a crowdfunded project that would improve either the downtown or other areas of the city. So we are currently, right now, looking for potential projects. And we'll come back to you with more ideas.
Great.
Thank you. All right, items for our next agenda. Does anyone have any items for our next agenda? All right, well, our next scheduled meeting is June 22nd. Last call, if there's anyone for public comment. All right, seeing none. If there is no further business to come before the commission, this meeting will now adjourn at 8:10 PM.
Very perfect.
Thank you all so much.
Perfect, Robert.
Thank you.
Good job.
Well done.